Yeah. Oh,
I don't know. You speak really loud.
I know, right? I'm a mom of 10, for goodness sakes.
Why you yell?
No, I'm Rivka. What did you say? Rakaba. I love it. It's a good one. All right, ladies. Hey, Nati. Ladies, there's seats that emptied out. I don't know if they're actually empty or people went to take a break, but if you want to move up closer, you're so welcome to. I should take the mic. Okay. Kind of like swings.
I'll stop.
Yeah. You could just perfect. Okay. I hope so. All right, ladies, we're going to get started because I'm going to try to respect your time. I know that some of you have been, you guys are like the Golani of the Tshuva Brigade, you know? It's hardcore.
Very Givati.
Givati, that's right. Let's hand it to them. Exactly. Like, it's amazing. Some of us like do Tshuva a few minutes a day, you know? Like, we're lucky. You guys are just like hardcore. So I feel honored and humbled to be amongst such elite members of the Tshuva Brigade. And of course, I want to thank our wonderful Judy for giving me an excuse of missing bedtime. So it's always an easy yes you get for Tshuva. You give me the evening hours, I will come. Okay, so what do we want to talk about today? It's a little bit uncomfortable, I'm telling you right now, or at least it left me uncomfortable. I was having a conversation with a close friend on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I was sharing with her that I think that one of the areas in my life where I feel like I've made like tiny steps of progress is in feeling kind of brave enough to face a class without having all the answers. Like I'm feeling like a little brave enough to ask questions, knowing the answers are out there, trusting the answers are out there, and being okay if I'm not the one to provide those answers, you know? And so this is sort of going to be an experiment of that a little bit. I did practice it on my Monday morning class, and I warned the ladies that I was going to be teaching the same thing, and they came. So I guess it wasn't such a bad social experiment. So I'll tell you what, the class, I actually titled it The Voice in the Shofar. I see that you have the title of the file, but it's okay. The voice in the shofar versus the voice of the shofar, right? So what we're going to be focusing on is whose voice are we actually hearing in the shofar, okay? Now, in order to appreciate that, we have to spend a few minutes talking about a subject who is not, I mean, this is the first time I've talked about this subject connected to Rosh Hashanah. And I need a little bit of background, right? So the little bit of background is going to take us into the book of Judges, the book of Shoftim, and we're in the era of Devorah, the prophetess. Devorah, the judges, Devorah, the prophetess. And the way Devorah actually really defines herself, she says, En b'Yisrael, right? Not just a mother in Israel, but a mother of Israel, okay? So we're in that era. And just to understand a little bit of the background where Devorah sort of comes up from a bottom end kind of leadership position, is the Jewish people have been terrorized by an enemy whose general, his name is Sisera, and we learn details about the extent of how terrible things have gotten a little bit later on. Devorah herself shares them in her, and I'm giving you a little bit of a teaser, I mean like a little bit of a giveaway over here. In her victory song, she shares details of how bad things have gotten. And one of the things she shares is that all the open cities closed down because people were too terrified to travel. And that, of course, led to a collapse in economy and a collapse in community and a collapse in everything like that. The location of where they were is not so far from here, in what's known as Emek Yisrael. Today, it's known as the breadbasket of Israel. And it really always kind of had that position because of the incredible agriculture that has almost always come from that part of the country. And all of that went to the wayside because people were just too terrified to even work in the fields. So they had this enemy that had infiltrated, and they had 900. I mean, the pasuk describes it as 900 iron carriages, right? Chariots. I mean, tanks, basically the equivalent of the most fully loaded, top-notch, armored vehicle, 900 of them for 20 years patrolling, just rolling through our grounds, through our cities, through our properties, just like ramming whatever gates were there, whatever forms of protection had long since fallen. And it was in this scene that sort of Deborah emerges, and she creates, some kind of steadiness and some kind of like space to recover and regroup. And it's from that place that she receives this prophecy that she should tell the general Barak to gather 10,000 troops, go up to the top of Mount Tabor, which is an amazing place to visit, and I highly recommend it. About a 45-minute drive from here. It's exquisite hike. Gather these 10,000 troops, and God tells Deborah, tell Barak, I will hand the enemy into your hands. Like, you just have to go through the motions, and victory is guaranteed. And of course, we're not going to go into those details, but some of you might be familiar that Barak hesitates and says, I will go only if you come with me, Deborah, and she agrees to go, etc. And then what happens? Again, Deborah describes this in her victory song. What happens is that the skies open up, and there's this absolute like monsoon, like this terrible rain. And what was this little nachal, this little kind of like river, like a nachal, like the nachal that you go hiking through all the time in Israel, and it still exists today, Nachal Kishon. Because of this crazy amount of rain, it turns into like a tsunami. And Devorah describes almost very similar to what happens at Kriyat Yam Suf, is that the enemy, they just get caught up in the mudslide of it all, and the rain and the fear and the terror of it all. And here's the moment that I want to talk about. Their general, who is Sisera, who has been like the hero of the last 2 decades, in his people's eyes. Of course, he has been the most feared individual from the Jewish people's eyes. In the moment of truth, right? He's been taunting the Jewish people, come out and fight us. And in that moment of truth, the minute he sees that defeat is heading in their direction, he jumps ship. He literally jumps off his horse, and instead of remaining with his people and fighting to the end like a real hero would do, in an absolutely cowardly manner, he jumps off his horse and he runs. And he runs into the tent of Yael. Yael is sort of like a neutral ally. She's non-Jewish. A fascinating story. Deserves really a class on her own. And maybe, please God, we will. What? Yael is not Jewish, no.
She's on that. Can you give a class on
Yeah.
that?
We should talk about Yael. We should, Bezrat Hashem, talk about Yael and the amazing stories there's amazing lessons that she teaches us. They're a descendant of Yitro. So they hadn't all converted, right? And according to many commentaries, she's not Jewish. And Sisera feels safe to run into her tent because she's an ally. She's both an ally with the Jews, and she's an ally with Sisera's army. So he comes into the tent, and of course, she, in her very ingenious way, she feeds him heavy cream, and he becomes drowsy, and he falls asleep. And at that moment, she takes the pin out of her tent, like the tent pin, right? Like the foundation of her home. Okay, she doesn't use a kitchen knife. She doesn't use any of the armor he might have run in with. Like, again, a lot of symbolism here. She takes that foundation of her home and she uses it to kill him. And then moments later, she sees Barak, who's the Jewish general, come, and she calls him into the tent and she says, look, Barak, look what I've showed. Look what I have for you. And like, basically that declares like absolute and full victory for the Jewish people, right? And then it's at that point that Deborah stands up, but Tashar Deborah and Barak, and they have this like magnificent song. And actually, we read this story that I just shared, and the song of Deborah that follows it. They're chapter 4 and 5 in the book of Judges, and we read them during the Haftorah of Parshat Beshalach, right? Which we can understand makes sense. We're familiar with the idea that the sages tried to find Haftorah that had like some kind of thematic like similarity. So, of course, in Beshalach, we talk about the crossing of the sea and the drowning of our enemies, and the Az Yashir Moshe, and of course, the Song of Miriam as well. But in the Haftorah, we read about the story of this miraculous victory and the Song of Devorah, right? Okay, that was all an introduction. Now, what I want to focus on is Devorah's song it's actually quite lengthy. It's about 30 verses, which is pretty long, considering that Az Yashir, which probably gets a lot more, spotlight time, is not even that long. And right towards the end of the song, so in the song, she shares some of the details of the victory that were a little bit cryptic in the first chapter. She praises those soldiers that have shown up to fight for their people. She reprimands those soldiers that shirked their duty and didn't want to show up because they sort of felt like this is not ours to fight. Let them figure this out on their own. She highly praises Yael for her bravery in slaying the enemy general. She identifies herself as, like I mentioned earlier, Em Yisrael, a mother of Israel, which is very fascinating and again begs for a conversation because at that point she had a lot in her repertoire, Where does she take us? Ba'ad hachalon nishkecha. Through the window peered. Who's peering? We don't know yet. I forgot that at night when my eyes don't work. The tiyabeg, and she wails. Okay, pay attention to that word. If you have a pen, I would circle it. The tiyabeg. Whoever this woman is, she's standing at the window and she is wailing. Who is it? Em Sisra. It is the mother of Sisra. Ha'ashnev, Ba'ad ha'ashnev. She is wailing besides the window. She looks through the lattice, right? And she asks, why is the chariot so long in coming? Why so late the clatter of his wheels? Okay. So in a very kind of surprising turn of events, Devorah brings us into the home of the mother of Sisra. And we find her standing at the window, and it's very visual. And we see her sort of like looking through, and she's wailing. And she looks again, and she wails further. And something's off. Her mother's heart is not settled. Why is this taking so long, right? Her son, the hero, right? This is his day when he's supposed to come home and triumph. Where is he? Okay. Now, before we read the next two psukim, what comes up for you when you hear this pasuk? What kind of emotion, what feelings? And there's no right or wrong. I just want to hear from you, ladies.
Well, it's very strange. Because, of course, like when you're a child, they could be 50 years old and be your child. Your heart, if they're not well or something is wrong, your heart is unsettled. But Cicero is not a good person.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean his mother didn't love him.
Good. So you're saying, so what's the strange part? What you're saying is strange. A mother's heart is not strange. That's universal.
That's universal.
So what's strange here?
Well, the sounds of her wailing are like representative of the sounds of the shofar.
Good. We're going to get to that. So you're jumping ahead. Excellent. Right. So, but first, go ahead, please.
It's strange to feel compassion for this woman.
Yafet. We can't help but feel compassion, and yet we feel there's. Wait, no, I shouldn't be feeling compassion for her. She's right, but yet there seems to be an almost universal evoking of motherly instinct. Now, by the way, when I use the word mother, particularly throughout this conversation, I'm not speaking specifically or exclusively about women that have actually birthed children. And the reason I emphasize that is because when Devorah identifies herself as Em Yisrael, we do not know if she ever had children. The text doesn't tell us. The commentaries don't comment about it. The Gemara, the Medrash, nobody talks about it. And we know that in our history of women, the odds of somebody being infertile is not low. And it's possible. I mean, it's just as possible she did have children. What is the second?
Little samples talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Gorgeous exhibit A on my left. So we're not, when she says envy Israel, it could very well be she had a tribe of children at home. But it could just as well be that she didn't have children. And that's not what's important. What's important is that when she identifies herself as En B'Yisrael, she is widening the definition of what a mother is. Okay? And that's important for us to hold on to. Because what we're going to find is something very fascinating by the time we finish this kind of conversation is like, let's remember, we're going to connect this to the shofar, right? We know that. I mean, I'm not giving away something you weren't aware of yet. Before we blow the shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we have already read in the Torah reading what? Sarah longing for a child, right? The mother energy, the birthing, the desire, the turning to God, the mercy, the compassion, okay? It's building. Then we go into the Haftorah and we meet Hannah. And Hannah has met her edge. And she walks into the tabernacle and she says, now, grant me that child. Change every rule in your book, darn it. The rules of nature and the rules of God himself, of the Torah, and give me that child. And she is so passionate that Eli mistakes her for a drunk, right? So we hear this mother energy. There's a desire, there's a pull. And then, in an almost surprising way, the shofar continues on that theme. But what's disturbing and strange is who it models it after, right? So here, let's go back to Devorah for a moment, and let's try to see what is Devorah doing here. And again, these are all just thoughts. Is she reminding us that war has a human side? Is she reminding us for every soldier that we see there is a mom at home not sleeping? And I'm sure there's moms here that can, that deserve so much of our gratitude for being those sleepless moms, right? So is she reminding us the human side of war? Maybe. But why does she choose Sisera? Okay, so then we go, so just as our compassion is sort of woken up because it's like we feel for this mother, and at the same time, we're feeling bad that we feel for this mother because she's the enemy's mother. She's the mother of a terrorist. Excellent. Excellent. 1 second. You're beautiful. Yafet. So but what's going on here? What's going on? And I don't have answers. And I'm warning you now that you may be uncomfortable with some of what we're going to say, because I'm going to invite you to maybe step out of an echo chamber and think, can there be another way to think about this? Am I surrounding myself by only hate? Is that the way? Maybe. But maybe there's another way also. Okay? So hold on a second, because I'm going to emphasize your question even further with what Devorah does over here, right? So here we have this woman looking through the window, and she's wailing, and she looks some more. And here's the ironic part. We know her son is dead. We read that a verse before. Okay? The wisest of her princesses answer her. She too returns answers to herself, right? She's a noble woman, okay? I mean, if we think generals are big shots in our day and age, how much more so during those times, right? So she has lived the life of royalty, of nobility, of a VIP, surrounded by these, the translation in English is a little rough. She's not really princesses. Shirotah are like her maidservants, like her. And now, in the following pasuk, what they're going to tell her is what they know she wants to hear to calm down, okay? And this is where it gets really difficult. So what do they tell her? So they're watching this mom that's like totally anxious, right? And, like my kids tell me, Ma, he just is talking to his friends. Oh, but it's an hour and a half since school ended. Yeah, but Berkey, he's just talking to his friends. And usually 99.9% of the time, they're right. But they'll tell that to me because they're just trying to okay, let's take the panic out of this, And so what do they tell her to take the panic out of this? Are they not finding, again, I'm going to read this in Hebrew because the Hebrew packs a much stronger punch. Halo yimtsu'u yichaku, I'm sorry, my eyes. Okay. Halo yimtsu'u yichaku shalal. Are they not finding and dividing booty? What's the booty? Rechem, rachmatayim. A womb, 2 wombs, right? And then it goes on to describe, or as the English says, a woman, 2 women to every man. A spoil of dark garments to Sisera, which were considered luxuries, a spoil of dark garments of embroidery, dyed garments of embroidery for the neck of the spoiler, right? This is poetry, so there's like a little bit of repetition going on over here, right? Listen to what's going on. The woman who a moment ago, we were conflicted because we were feeling compassion because she's wailing at that window and we're feeling for the mom, right? What comforts her? Knowing that her son is out there dividing booty. What is the booty? He's raping Jewish women.
That is disgusting.
Right?
Sounds like Arabs.
What?
Sounds like Arabs.
And that's exactly what you were just referring to, right? This video that went, audio, must have been audio because I refused to watch anything post October 7th. And I heard this. So it must have been both. Where you have this terrorist in one of the kibbutz in the Otif, calls his parents and is gloating about all the horror that he has just done, raping, mutilating, murdering, burning children, women, men. And in the background, he's like, Mama, Papa. And then it goes off in Arabic. So you need the translation there. And they're so proud of him. And they're so happy. And they're so like, you've made the dean's list, you know? This is our nachas. This is the education that we gave you, and you have really accomplished it. Wow, wow. Does it get any better than this, you know? So, and exactly. And I think, again, this is not really the conversation that I planned for today, but I think it is important to note, especially in a post-October 7th world, and especially as we come up to a 2nd year anniversary where we're still fighting this fight, right? This is so much of what went wrong, is that compassion in the larger world was misplaced. And yet, look at the choice of wording that the pasuk has, rechem rachmatayim. Listen, our text is very creative when it describes women, right? It could have used many, many different words. Devorah could have used many, many different words. This is poetry. So maybe she specifically goes for something that's going to pack a punch. So on one hand, you could look at it, rechem rachmatayim, it goes right to the root of what was going on. What were they doing with these women? They were violating them in their most sacred space. Rechem rachmatayim, compassion, double compassion. You can't say one without the other. You can't say rechem without hearing rachmanut. You can't say rachmatayim without holding double compassion. Who's this compassion for? What is going on here? Right? And we see the unfortunate results. We saw it in the UN. We see it everywhere when compassion is misguided. Compassion is a divine attribute. It has to be guided by what the Eibishter wants, what God wants us to do with that compassion. It's not ours to just hand out, right? But I'm getting sidetracked for a moment because here's where I really want to go with this. Okay, so hold on to all of that. And okay, this is what I wanted to say. So I love that I am giving this class surrounded by Dvorot. I mean, is this nuts or what? Okay. First of all, this garden is magical. This is just such, like as if such an evening couldn't get more special, such a day. This is just like magical. So I got into the whole story of Dvorah around Purim time. I'm not going to go into how and why. And actually, when you wanted me to teach for Shavuot, I was going to do like something text-based on Dvorah because I was like really, really immersed in it. And I'm still heavily immersed in it. And so much has come up for me on a personal level, on a wider level of who Dvorah was and everything that it stands for, etc. I'm also allergic to bees, by the way. Yeah.
Wow. But wasps or bees? Because they're
what do you say? They're sleeping.
No, but you could.
The yellow jackets. I'm allergic to the yellow jackets. And so I've been thinking a lot about Torah, and I've been thinking a lot about the message. I feel like Devorah's message here is like more relevant than ever. Like I said, in a post-October 7th world, where be careful with your compassion, And so I've been hating on the mother of Sisera. I have to be honest. I've been hating on the mother of Sisera. And when I was preparing the story of Deborah the first time, which was just after Purim Pesach time, I mean, I'm laughing at myself because it was like Erev Pesach, and I'm sitting on my computer because I'm so obsessed. One of my kids came in and she's like, "Ma, do you know it's Erev Pesach?" I did. So I've been hating on the mother of Sisera. So when I was doing my early preparation for this, and it's always ongoing. Anybody that knows and teaches and lives with what they do, they know how ongoing it is. I saw this Gemara. I saw a notion to the idea that the sounds of the shofar we learn from this wailing woman, and I pushed it away. I wasn't ready to process it. I pushed it away. It is not in any handout that I have ever taught from yet. And then in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, I don't remember what I was reading, and I saw this Gemara that we're about to look at, and like my brain and my heart exploded, and I was like, I am not letting this woman hijack my shofar blowing. Like, I was so disturbed by the idea, like the shofar blowing is a buildup. And especially as a mom who has just recently started going back to shul, for so many years, Baruch Hashem, I was home, like I said, with my Shmuel, I was home caring for my children and not being able to be in shul. And like literally just in the last maybe 2 years or so, I've been able to appreciate and enjoy the buildup of coming to shofar blowing, versus having it in like an isolated incident on my couch when my husband comes home. And I was like, what is she doing here? Why is she here on the holiest day of the year? Why is she another mother that I have to confront when I just want to spend time with Sarah and with Hannah, right? So this is where like, I just had this collision, And like, I really just the last week or so, how much time did I have already? Just tried to come to a place where I could go to shul and lean into shofar blowing and not feel like it had been stolen away from me, right? So I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that I was holding on to while I was listening to shofar. So for starters, we have Bamidbar, and the pasuk tells us, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall observe a sacred occasion, right? This is where we're given the commandment. Of course, 7th month, first day, that's Rosh Hashanah. And you shall not work. You shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. Yom Trua Yelachem. That's what we're told, okay? Then Targum Onkelos, which is one of the commentators that always translates the text into Aramaic. What does he do? I'm not going to read all the Aramaic, but I want you to just look at the last words here, because what he says is Yom Yebava Yelechon. Right? We hear that word again. That's the same word that we met earlier. She looks out of the window, Vatiya Bev. So what is he telling us? He's saying it shall be a day of sounding the ram's horn, of wailing for you. And then the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, okay? And this is where it gets where it really forces you to look this in the eye, and you can't run away from it. What does the Gemara tell us? Abaya says, as it is written, it is a day of sounding the shofar to you. And he quotes that pasuk we just looked at. And when we translate the verse in Aramaic, it is a day of yivava to you. And to define a yivava, the Gemara quotes a verse that is written about the mother of Sisera. Through the window she looked forth, and she wailed, Vatiya Bev, the mother of Sisera. One sage, the Tana of the Breita, holds that this means moaning, broken signs, as in the blast called Shvarim. So, right? Or another Tana of the Mishnah says, and on page 2 here, it holds the meaning, it whimpers, as in the short blast called Trua. So, that's the Trua.
Wow.
Right? And the Tosfot in that very spot, and the Gemara tells us, he quotes the Aruch, who was an early Rishon, and he says, okay, this is really crazy. He says like this, that we blow 100 sounds of the shofar to correspond to the 100 cries of Sisera's mother. So not only is the wailing coming from her, but the amount of crying that we do, the amount of shofar blows that we do, 100 is also coming from Sisera.
What are we supposed to do with that?
Yeah, nobody else ever cried.
Right. Good. Excellent. So that's excellent. So that's what I was exactly saying. I was saying, no, excellent. First of all, if we wanted to compare it to a cry, let's be honest, it's a human familiarity. Okay. We're not talking about this magnificent instrument that you just played for us, and I would need some kind of reference point. A cry, for goodness sakes. Right? We all know what that looks like. And if you want to talk about the cry of somebody that is concerned about the loss of their child, unfortunately, that's also too close to home. At a personal level, watching a loved one. Did the Gemara even need to bring an example? Question number one. And like who mentioned it? Are we lacking for figures in our history who cried? Okay. Right? No, we're not. So now you could try to very just kind of like easily say, well, the Gemara was looking for like a linguistic handle, as they would call it, So here it says Yavava and there it says Yavava, so we're going to lean in on that. But anybody who's learned a little bit of Gemara knows the Gemara takes poetic license in a lot of things, So it's hard to just say, and more than that, I would add, on Rosh Hashanah, we know that every aspect of Rosh Hashanah, down to the food we eat, is heavily symbolic, right? Because it's not just about the 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah. It's about, I am, like birthing a new year. Every part of this is so laden with symbolism because I want to ensure that all the months that are to come are going to be sweet and multiple and all the different symbolisms that we have throughout the Rosh Hashanah. Right? So the fact that we bring Sisra into the shofar cannot be just a casual reference, right? So I want to hear from you ladies. Like, what do we do with the fact that Sisra's mother is present with us at the shofar blowing? Go ahead. Excellent. That's exactly what I want. Off script.
I just want to say one thing. To love is in Hebrew. To love, it's Leo. It's in Hebrew. Everything is in Hebrew. It's the start,
תודה. שנה טובה,
גם לכם, כל הברכות.
אמן, אמן.
שלא תדעו ייסורים.
אמן.
שלא תדעו ייסורים. תהיה לכם רק אהבה.
אמן, אמן.
Love, it's in Hebrew. It's Leo.
So we got, we're too loud, you're saying? I'm happy to go with that.
We're being too loud for you.
Yeah, I don't need the mic. I know. I do need the mic. I'm sorry, I can't not get excited. Oh, maybe we could just lower the phone or something. I don't know how to do that, but somebody could, yeah. What?
He's fine.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Where I'm to these places, right? Like it's ugly parts of me and the bad parts, like no bad parts. Do the work. I think they're like burden. They turn into like and release. That's what it means.
Right.
Like more like the sound. Me, them. That. Things that are like inside me going on.
The M sister that's in you, right? Is that what you're saying? Right. The M sister in me that I've been hating. Gorgeous. Good. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I love that. because it's not about the external story, it's about the internal story, and that's what Rosh Hashanah is about, and that's what the shofar is about. And that's why, by the way, some people say that they do use the mother of Sisera because her cry is wordless. A lot of the crying that we have in our history, there's words affiliated with that. Okay, sure.
No, I asked him.
Is it?
He said, no, it's good.
It's, I don't know. I hear myself. It's a bit of a problem. Any other thoughts that anyone's having? Anybody have something like, yes, please.
I'm sorry to talk so much. This is
Say,
just keep raising my hand.
please,
Anyways, I live in Denver, and we had this extraordinary weekend where those of us, a group of us from Aish, went to the Belzer community to visit with the traveling Hasidim in Muncie. And the Belzers and other Hasids were these extraordinary strimals.
right.
And so I just had to ask, I've been dying to ask this question. What is the meaning? Like, tell us the story of the strimal. And so the strimal,
They never were that big before. My son-in-law has one that's like this tall. Yeah, they're getting taller and taller. It's like what a strimal.
Right. And they've gotten more and more expensive, and the father, if he has a lot of sons, he really better save his parnasa, because he gives one to each of his sons when he gets married.
They're
But
$2,000 of strimal.
And up.
Yeah.
And the origin is that in Russia there was some lovely king who said that the Jewish men needed to wear a fur tail of, like, I don't know if it was a beaver or a rat or what it was, as like an insult, and the Jews turned this strimal.
Beautiful.
And that's what I think of when Sisera's mother is with us.
Excellent. Excellent.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful. You're right on target. You're right on target. So let's look real quickly at this quote from Tzadok HaKohen, okay? And he writes like this. I'll read it quickly, and then I'll slow down on the parts that are important. And this is the idea of what is brought in the Torah, okay, which is the pre-runner of the Shulchan Aruch, in the name of the Aruch, which I just quoted. The reason we sound 100 shofar blasts is corresponding to the 100 cries of Sisera's mother. For this reason, it is also found in the Medrash that Israel accepted upon themselves to blow 100 sounds on Rosh Hashanah, like the cries uttered by the mother of Sisera as she wept in distress. We need to understand why they established 100 shofar blasts corresponding to Sisera's mother. And it seems that the explanation is, as we have learned in the Gemara and the Medrash, that the shofar comes to confound the accuser, okay? So even if Sisera's mother's cries were cries of accusation against Israel, they are now turned around, and the 100 shofar blasts stand opposite those cries to sweeten and nullify them. Yay. Now, regarding the war with Sisera, since Sisera and his hosts were destroyed in war, as it says in Shoftim, the stars fought from heaven in their courses against Sisera, and the sages said that Sisera's mother made 100 cries when she thought he had perished in war. And this came from her bitterness of soul. And the cries, listen to this, it's so important. And the cries of the nations rise and can strengthen the powers of impurity. That was why Israel needed the merit of the shofar to counterbalance them, that the sound of holiness would cancel out the sound of impurity. So you see what what I'm hearing him say is that when even our enemies cry out, there's strength to that. And that gives strength to the klipa, to the negative energies. We need to show up in shul, and we need to counterbalance those negative energies with cries of our own, the cry of the shofar, right? So what I think, in making it relevant to where we are today, if we're talking about the poor them cries that people are marching in the hundreds of thousands, whether in Paris or London or Sydney or New York City, right? The poor them cries, that is giving energy to the negative forces. It doesn't just dissipate into nowhere land. We have the responsibility to create a counterbalance force of compassion that is centered around godly acts. And if there ever was a need to refute that, it is now. So it puts a responsibility on us. So sister's mother shows up in shul and she says, hi. And we say, really? We got to get our act together. We are going to drown out your cries with cries of our own. Of the deepest, most sincere, most authentic, most Torah-oriented cries of our own. Okay. Okay. And furthermore, okay, and then it says it connects it to Amalek. Read that paragraph inside yourselves, ladies. Look at the last paragraph. Thus, in place of 100 cries of impurity, Israel, okay, established for themselves 100 holy sounds. And in truth, these 100 holy sounds rise higher and subdue the cries of impurity, as is known from the Arizal, that the 100 shofar blasts sweeten judgments in all 4 worlds. And therefore, the Torah wrote in this reason of the cries of sister's mother is to teach that the blasts of holiness are set directly opposite the cries of impurity to nullify them. You know what's just coming to me? One of the things that the Lubavitcher Rebbe pushed so strongly for was that every single Jew, here,
Very sorry.
One second.
We will just be exactly what you just said.
Okay, so you asked a very interesting question. Okay, and Rev Eliyahu Kitov, who's the author of the Book of Our Heritage, he says as follows: it has become widespread custom to sound the shofar 100 times on Rosh Hashanah, including Tkiyot Shvarim and Trua. These 100 sounds are considered symbolic of the 101 letters contained in the lament of Sister's mother as she wailed her son's return from the battlefield, as recorded in the Song of Devorah. Okay, so he introduces suddenly the number of 101, which is so fascinating that you just said that, Tmima. And he's saying why 101? Because if you count the letters in that pasuk, that verse that we opened up our conversation with, you'll see it's 101. Excuse me. The purpose of the sounding of the shofar is to arouse Hashem's compassion for the descendants of Yitzchak, who was offered like a ram upon the altar, whereas the lament of Sisera's mother was an expression of grief suffused with animosity and hatred. Waiting for her son to return from the battlefield, she imagined that he was busy slaughtering and taking spoils, and it was through thoughts such as these that she thought to console herself. Can there be greater cruelty? Therefore, we implore, may the 100 shofar sounds of compassion and mercy nullify every one of those other outcries, except one: the sorrow of a mother over her son. Oh, okay, sure. The sorrow of a mother over her son.
Forever the most brutal, for even the most brutal of mothers is deserving of compassion when she laments her son. Thus, we sound 100 sounds and not 101. The last two lines, by the way, is a mistake. I copied from an article and that was included, but up until now is a direct quote from his book. Okay. So like when I first read this, like I was like, I'm not putting it in. I am putting it in. How do you not put him from the Book of Our Heritage? Everybody reads the Book of Our, right? I go back and forth there because I was very uncomfortable with this idea, like he brings up, finding compassion for this woman. And he's asking us to do that. Right? And we're uncomfortable with that, as we should be. Right? And then the question is, perhaps what we're being asked to do is not necessarily channel compassion, but we're being asked something even bigger. Retain your sensitivity. Retain your sensitivity. And this is what I said earlier, because often we surround ourselves with like-minded people. But of course, right? These are the people we enjoy. So what happens is you create an echo chamber. Everybody thinks alike. Everyone's listening to the same podcast. Everyone's agreeing with the same people over and over and over again. And it creates a little bit of like a hate movement. Now, it could be they're deserving of our hate. Wipe out Amalek. They're deserving of our hate. But we can't do it from a place of brutality. That's not who we are.
Not like them.
Right. Exactly. Not like them. And that is why it is with such pride that we look at our soldiers and at our army and we see the lengths we go to protect human life. And unfortunately, sometimes that's used against us, as we see with the unfortunate reality of our hostages still rotting away in their tunnels because they know how much we value human life, right?
Yeah, but they're killing the soldiers in the process.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And it's not an easy, thank God I don't have to make these kinds of decisions. I could just argue about it, right? So I think what the Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov is asking of us is, don't lose your sensitivity. Maybe it means continue to hate, but don't do it from a place where you're getting lost like one of them. That you too have become animalistic in your brutality of wanting to kill every single last one of them. Now, it may be that that's what they're deserving of, but we have to be careful, right? Like it says that after all the enemies drowned at the Yam Suf, we don't say hollow because God's creatures were drowning. There's a sensitivity that we, as the chosen people, are tasked with retaining. And so that's why it's 100 and not 101. Because one wailing, we're gonna hold on to. It's gonna be a reminder for us. Yes, she's the enemy. She's also a mother. Does that mean I owe her compassion? I don't know, but I owe her a pause. I owe her a pause. Right?
Who made her son?
Right.
Who made her son the killer that he is?
Good.
It's like the mother would come out
Excellent.
and be like, Mama, Papa, be proud.
Excellent. And that's why I'm saying I don't know that I owe her compassion. But I can't get lost in the hate brigade. You hear the difference? We cannot sound, it's a problem. It's true. It's uncomfortable. It's so much easier to just say, carpet bomb them, throw down a nuclear bomb.
The hate changes you.
Excellent. That's a very important point. We cannot afford that. We are God's emissaries on this world. We cannot afford to allow hate to change us. And again, we have the command of Amalek, destroy every single one of them. And look at the price Shaul paid because he left one of them alive for a few hours because he was having compassion. It's nuanced. And what Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov is suggesting is sit with that nuance. Don't try to whitewash it. Stop trying to make everything black and white. It's not love or hate. Maybe ultimately it will, but recognize there's a process you need to constantly work through.
There's color.
There's color. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
There's no such thing as
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
gray. Having gray
Excellent.
also is not
Excellent.
a color.
Excellent. Right. I'm just gonna of course.
The idea of sending the bird away with the mother bird goes into this craziness. The babies cries, and that opens up the heavens that cries mother. That's something obviously.
It's so interesting you're bringing that up. Who brought it up this morning?
Why don't you bring it up?
Claire
What did you
Chaya.
say?
No, not Claire Chaya. It was
Mother
so Claire Chaya was in the class today. Who was it? Chaimasha. Did you just learn that Torah with Chaimasha? So interesting because Chaimasha was in class this morning and she also brought up that idea and she brought it from a little bit of a different angle. And she said that the answer to your question is yes. And that's why there's so much conversation about mother and longing and birthing on Rosh Hashanah. Because we stand before Hashem and we say, Eibishter, like, you're our father here. You've brought us into creation. See us in that way. See us as a mother sees her child, right? The Shekhinah is the feminine form, right? So yes to what you're saying, but Chaimasha said something interesting this morning. She was talking about that very same mitzvah, and she talked about the idea how it's very hard to catch a bird, right? Birds, they fly. It's just very hard to get them down. But he said the one time you could do it is when she's protecting her young. So she's going to protect her young and she's going to pay, and you're going to grab her at that point. So in other words, you have taken advantage of her mother's heart to not move because she's protecting her young ones, and you're going to violate her at her most vulnerable space. So you're not allowed to do that. So it's just a different angle of the mother's heart in the same mitzvah that you're bringing up. It's interesting, you know? Okay, let me just, I know my watch is fast, but I don't know how fast it is. It's not, okay, yeah.
All these things we learn, there's something in it that's a part of us.
Sure.
So is there a part of us that's like sister and mother?
Well, so that's what was suggested earlier. In other words, I don't know. I would like to believe that none of us here have a part of us that's a sister's mother, in the sense that in our very mother's milk, we raised our children to kill and rape and mutilate, you know? But could there be a part of us that takes advantage of others? That gloats when someone we don't like has a difficult day? Probably to some degree or another, when there's somebody at work who's been making our lives miserable, and then we found out that they were declined the promotion that you knew they wanted. Is there a part of us that smiles in the bathroom at the mirror? You know? So do I think that each one of us have something? Yeah. I don't believe to the extent that sister's mother, but something that needs a little bit of, we need to show up and look and see, right? I just want to wrap this up. There's one more quote over here that actually comes from Rabbi Radi Yosef, and he says something very interesting. And read the whole thing yourself, but I'm just going to read the last paragraph because this is really a crazy twist that he does. It says like this: when sister's mother was wailing, she was overtaken by birth-like pains and wailed like a woman in labor. There's something going on here. The Rashbat adds that it is alluded to with the birth. Through the window peered and wailed the mother of Sisera. The window, hachalon, is the numerical value of 99, corresponding to the 99 cries of near death a woman wails during labor, especially after she saw by sorcery that Sisera was lying on the ground in blood and a woman stood over him. That, of course, was Yael. But you know what I thought this morning when I was teaching this, when I had the image of a person lying in blood and a woman standing over him, that's also the midwife at a birth.
Right. Wow.
That's that image as well. There's
Wow.
blood is exquisite and gory. I mean, birth is exquisite and gory. So it's very strange, and we don't have time to really go into this, but it's very strange. And this, the Rabbi Vadi quotes an earlier Rishon here, that they bring in a birthing woman somehow into her wailing. Okay, we can't get away from this mothering, from birthing, from something new, from opportunity, maybe loss, maybe this, maybe that, you know? And I'll just conclude real quickly with this last quote over here that I brought from the Shalah kadosh. And he says like this: each group of sounds begins with a tkiya, a whole note, and is followed by a shvarim, a broken note,
divided into three parts or a true and an entirely fragmented sound, right? But each broken note is not left in its brokenness. It is followed by another tkiya, a whole sound. When we hear the shofar, we hear this message. I started off whole, I became broken, even splintered into fragments, but I shall become whole again. I shall become whole again. And I just think that that is just an amazing prayer, an intention that we could have, you know? And I think that it's really also the story of our people today, you know, where there is fragmentation and there's a lot of loss and there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of wailing. And we shouldn't lose sight of what it's all about. And we should really dig deep and find what we need to counterbalance those negative energies, you know? And that's the way in which we're going to get ourselves as a people to a place of wholeness again. All right. So I'll conclude with that. I'm not going to do it now, but maybe the next time I have the opportunity to speak to this gorgeous crowd. There's this wonderful book that I've started reading recently called Torah of the Mothers. It's a collection of essays of all different like women scholars, Torah scholars, that just share from different Torah aspects. And she talks also a little bit about the story of Devorah and the shofar, etc. And she says one interesting point, which I thought was worth mentioning. I was going to read it inside because she writes it so beautifully. When Sisera is wailing, Sisera, the mother of Sisera, is wailing, there's, even though intuitively maybe she knows the truth, but she's still hoping to the point where she's talking herself into a narrative that, like, it's Baba Mises, right? But you don't talk yourself into Baba Mises unless you're somewhere there's a sliver of hope, you know? And so that's sort of the message that she takes out of the sound, you know, the voice in the shofar, right? Is like, hold on to that hope. Hold on to that hope, right? And it can take you to some amazing places. All right. So with that, ladies, Shana Tova, Gmar Chatima Tova.
So much.
You're so welcome.
You know, there is a statue, Esther, of a mother that is holding a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every day we're going and every day
Uh-huh.
Nikki Inver.
Uh-huh.
And every day I'm going back, I'm going on the temple.